There's a lot of debate on the internet about hard versus soft and blah, blah, blah. It's a spectrum. Okay. Everybody has a magic system, even a very soft like magic system like Tolkien has got some kind of like magic can do this, magic can't do that. Soft magic systems, basically the big divide is how much does the reader understand? Right? In hard magic systems, the reader fully comprehends the magic system, the limitations thereof, what they can do with it, perhaps even to the degree of like a video game, how much mana you have or whatever powers your magic system, etc. And in a soft magic system, it might just be that there is magic, and some people can do magic, and who knows exactly how it works.
Releasing your inner dragon. So, Marie, in my opinion, what separates the fantasy genres from every other genre is magic. But what does that mean? Like, what is a magic system?
So that's a very interesting question. And before I answer the question of what is a magic system, I actually want to linger on what you just said, what separates the fantasy genre from any other. Because here's the thing, like that is what separates the fantasy genre, 100%. But what does magic represent in your story? Is it your your factor of cool? Is it just the thing that makes the story different? Or does it actually represent something else? Tolkien's magic, for example, represented the natural world. It represented the the power of the natural world of nature, and that's why it's harnessed by the elves who live particularly close to nature and so on. And it's also why its corruption by Sauron is very much Tolkien's critique of the Industrial Revolution and all of the kind of evils that came with that kind of progress. So, and I mean, for all that his magic is very soft and it's very poorly defined on that scale of soft versus hard magic systems, his magic serves its purpose in his story because of that thematic representation. So, what is magic for you thematically? I think is one of the questions that you should ask. And the answer can 100% be it's wish fulfillment. It's, straight up it can be that. It is perfectly okay for it to be wish fulfillment. But it could also play a deeper role in your story and be more thematically impactful.
Yeah, and now that you've just made every viewer that just wants to be told what to do and not have to think about it, and you've made them click off our video, sure, let's go down this highbrow topic. Yeah, I mean that's something that I
Look,
don't
look,
think of.
everybody who's about to click off, there's a cat.
It is a
Look at him.
technically it's a cat video.
It's a cat video. There we go. There's another one over there on the desk.
So it is something that I don't think a lot of people think about. But again, I don't think a lot of people, especially newer writers, even think about the themes. They don't think
Mm.
about, what am I doing with my story? And then when you start talking about, yeah, but magic is going to be a layer on top of that that can be used as an allegory or whatever. So, like Star Wars,
Mm.
the magic system in Star Wars, the Force, in the first movie, now they ruined it when they tried to explain it with midichlorians and everything else. But the original movie, it was an allegory for faith. It was an
Mm.
allegory for belief in a higher power, something you can't see, something you can't touch. You just have to believe. You have to have faith that it's there. And
It's
so,
actually, it's actually because like speaking of Star Wars, it's actually even deeper than just faith because
mhm.
Star Wars has got an interesting depth to it that I sometimes think George thought about, and sometimes I think he didn't. Like sometimes I think he stumbled into the depth, and sometimes he didn't. But The Sith and the Jedi approach the same power source from two different perspectives.
Yeah.
They both, for lack of a better word, have access to God's power. But one of them, the Sith, accesses it through emotion. Now, predominantly, those are the negative emotions. It's anger, it's fear, and so on. But in theory, you could access the Force through love
Mm-hmm.
and through joy and so on. And that would still be the Sith way because it is an emotional access. Whereas the Jedi access faith by the suppression of ego,
Mm-hmm.
by the discipline of no emotion, of logic. And it's an interesting dictamony that they both draw on essentially the same power source with this means. And like I say, it's got an interesting depth to it, which sometimes I
Yes.
think George understood, and sometimes I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
no, he
The more
didn't.
I've used
It
A
was
New
an
Hope,
accident. I'm reading too much into this stuff.
yeah, the more I use A New Hope to use as a training tool and
Yeah.
talk about, themes or hero's journey or whatever, it does make me, when I'm sitting in my room alone and I'm
Mm.
crafting the classes and the talking points and everything like that, it makes me go, wow, George was so brilliant at storytelling to really do this. And then I remember that I'm probably just the college professor who's like, well, obviously the author chose blue as the color of the curtains because he was trying to signify. And the author's like, yeah, no, I was just writing in a hotel room and I needed curtains and they were blue in the hotel room, so I just wrote that. Like, I do think George just stumbled. I do not think. I'm sorry, I don't put a lot of credit in his genius, even though it's
I,
there. I mean, it is
I,
there.
so here's the reason, and I know it sounds weird, but here's the reason why I think that he actually did know somewhat what he was doing. Because for all of the flaws of the prequel trilogy, and there are myriad, I can speak for hours on the stupidity of midichlorians, but the actual crafting of the fall of the Republic was well done.
Yeah,
Not Anakin's fall. Anakin's fall needed work, but that's a different story.
right.
The fall of the Republic, however, was actually fairly well done.
Yeah. And the reason
Um,
why I push back on that, and
yeah.
I don't know, like these are, in my opinion, rumors, but you have the stories about how George made his movie,
Mm.
showed it to his friends, and they were all like, this is garbage. And then his wife actually re-edited it without, just kind of on her own. So when you hear something like that, then you're like, well, then obviously he couldn't have done that on purpose because his movie was something completely different than what it ended up being. If, and again, I have no idea if there's
Maybe his
rumors.
wife is a brilliant storyteller.
Right, exactly. Maybe while he was sleeping, she would go into the computer and be like, "Ah, stupid, stupid."
What the heck are you doing?
But again, I have no
Yeah.
actual knowledge of the truth
Yeah,
of any
no,
of that.
me either. But yeah,
But
anyway, so to get to talk about the interesting part of the Force is not only that it has this faith-based center of power, the central power that you need to have faith in order to use, but it has two different ways of accessing it. One
yeah,
emotional and the other one ordered and disciplined. And then the story is about these two sides countering each other.
mhm, which is what stories are about.
Yeah.
But to bring it back to the thematic question,
Yes.
in A New Hope, and most people just don't get this because it is so subtle, which is what a theme should be.
Mm,
A New Hope's theme is, should you rely on technology to save you or should you rely on faith to save you? And we know this because in the end of the movie, the point of view character is asked the question, do you want to use the targeting computer technology
mm.
and live? Or do you want to use belief in a higher power that you can't see, touch, feel, or taste to live?
Yeah.
Choose right and you'll live, choose wrong and you die.
Yeah.
And so we know that's the theme because that's the question the story asks at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And so when we look at it from that aspect, then, now we understand, and again, just looking at the theme from the first movie, that magic is an allegory to faith, to belief,
Mm,
to religion, to whatever you want to say. I don't think it was an allegory for Christianity or
yeah,
Buddhism or, anything. I think it
yeah,
was just an allegory for faith, just belief.
yeah,
But that still is a very powerful thing to have used because all of us struggle with that. Even hardcore atheists, we're still struggling with what we actually believe, and not necessarily, from a supernatural standpoint, but just the world around us. Every human is trying to figure out the world around us, every single day. That's what we do. So that's a thematic element that's going to reach everybody and make everybody think about it.
yeah.
So that's what we want a theme to do. And so yeah, that's it's something that a lot of people don't think about
Mm.
of what does my magic represent in the world? And it can be loose, like in the Genesis saga, my magic system is a representation of the ills of power. That power corrupts and ultimate power corrupts ultimately. That's where I'm at with that. It's not really a part of the theme of the stories, but it is an allegory that I'm playing with through the saga.
In Sangwheel, I actually have two magic systems, one internally facing and one externally facing. The internal one is about freedom. It's about humanity's freedom to make their own choices and to control their own bodies. And the external magic system is about where can you draw power from and have it be legit.
Yeah, there's some things you don't want to say to
Yeah.
that could be spoilers.
It's yeah.
So I was watching you going, oh, where's she gonna go with this?
Yeah. So yeah. So that's what my magic system my magic represents thematically. But I mean magic can also be cool. Like the Mistborn's got a great magic system based on burning of metals.
Hmm.
And while there are thematic components to the role that magic plays, it is also actually just cool.
Yeah,
Being able to burn metals and make things happen is cool.
and I think that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
So tying it back to, and again, I was going for the other question, but since we're on my first statement, the fantasy readers, and there are different types of fantasy readers, and we've talked about those before. There's epic fantasy, and then there's adventure fantasy, and epic fantasy fans are more in that Tolkien, they want to explore the world, they want to explore everything. Adventure fantasy tend to not, they'll say that they own copies of Lord of the Rings, but most of them have never actually finished it because it's just too much. And so, and I get it. They're still two different genres. Adventure fantasy and epic fantasy are two different, just like romance and Western. They are different. But at least for epic fantasy, one of the things that I love about magic systems, so you talked about Mistborn, we've talked about Lord of the Rings, and so on and so forth. As an epic fantasy fan, we like exploring not just the characters and their story and their place in the world and the event that's taking place, which is more what adventure fantasy does, because epic fantasy does that as well. It's just that we also want to explore the culture, the religions, the ways of living life, just thinking about things differently. And so magic gives epic fantasy this really amazingly robust and deep physics that doesn't exist in our world. It's not really like you can't write a book and show the amazing spectacularness of gravity
Yeah.
because we're all like, yeah, I know. I, I have gravity. It's here. Like you're like, and then they walked across the room. Their feet, they actually had to use muscles to pick up each foot, and it immediately fell back down because of the power of gravity. Like, yeah, you're not gonna write a system like that.
Yeah.
So it is a cool factor. I mean, you just can't get away from the cool factor of it.
Yeah. So to answer your second question, what is a magic system? Is a magic system is basically it sounds like this complicated thing, and a lot of people make it out to be because they compare it with a TTRPG or with a video game, etc. But a magic system just defines what magic can and can't do in your world. And there's a lot of debate on the internet about hard versus soft and blah, blah, blah. It's a spectrum. Okay. Everybody has a magic system, even a very soft like magic system like Tolkien has got some kind of like magic can do this, magic can't do that. Soft magic systems, basically the big divide is how much does the reader understand, right? In hard magic systems, the reader fully comprehends the magic system, the limitations thereof, what they can do with it, perhaps even to the degree of like a video game, how much mana you have or whatever powers your magic system, etc. And in a soft magic system, it might just be that there is magic, and some people can do magic, and who knows exactly how it works. And it just
And
depends on what you want to do with the magic. Neither system is superior to the other.
however,
Mm.
it is very important to know where you're at because depending on how defined your magic system is how much it can affect the actual story.
Yes and no.
If
But I'll
Well, I'll give you my
say your
yes, and
piece,
then
and
you
then I'll caveat. Yeah.
yeah. So if the reader really understands the magic system, then it just becomes a tool. It's like when we have a farm boy who has never wielded a sword, and so they go off on an adventure, they get their first sword. We watch them practice, we watch them make mistakes, they fail some, they grow some. And, at the end of the story, after they've earned being, what would be considered a master swordsman, and then they use the sword to kill the villain, we don't feel cheated by that because it's something that was earned. We understand it. We understand the physics behind it. We understand, when you shove a piece of steel through somebody's chest, they die. Like, we get that. That's the same with magic. If the reader understands magic and they've seen the character earn it, then when they use it, it's just a tool. Whereas soft magic, when you haven't defined it, so it's like Lord of the Rings. Why couldn't Gandalf had just go up to Frodo at the beginning of the movie and say, "Hey, you still got that ring that I let you have? Yeah, let me see it real quick." And then he teleports to Mount Doom, throws it in the volcano, and then teleports back and goes, "All right, well, that's dealt with. You want to go out to dinner?" Like, why couldn't he do that? We don't know because we don't know magic. But we do know that if he did that, A, it would be a very short book, and B, we wouldn't like it. Like, it would feel unearned. And
Okay.
that's what we want to stay away from.
Now I want to push back.
Yeah.
So yes and no. So yes, to some extent, you struggle to use magic and not have it feel like Deus ex machina if you have not introduced the reader to it, at least to the part you're going to use. Now, one, you don't need a full magic system for that. You can, if you have one specific spell that the character is going to use, you can introduce just that one spell, show them earning it, then show them using it. Done. You don't need a full system. But two, I will point you at Gandalf's return as Gandalf the White.
Mm-hmm.
We have no idea how he did that. We don't know how he escaped the Balrog. And yet, it is a crucial part of the story. And while yes, it is Deus ex machina, it is absolutely Deus ex machina, but it does not feel like, it doesn't leave me feeling cheated.
And I'm going to push back on your pushback.
Okay.
So when you're ready.
And the reason why it doesn't leave me feeling cheated is because Tolkien has set up a world where magic works in a fairy tale manner. Okay. And Gandalf is the fairy godmother. The fairy godmother can do almost limitless things, but only within the sphere of off the camera for the most part,
Right.
right? So Gandalf coming back from the dead is fine because it fits the fairy tale story nature. It's the same as the ring. What can the ring do? The ring can do what plot needs it to do because it's a fairy tale cursed item.
Right.
And
The reason
so because it fits, I don't feel cheated by Gandalf
Oh,
return.
So I don't think that it's that. And I'm going to push, that's where my pushback is at.
Okay.
I think you would feel different if Gandalf was the POV character.
Maybe.
Because he's just a secondary character, then that's, in my opinion, the only reason why Gandalf's resurrection doesn't matter to us because he's not the story. If he was the story, if we were following the tales of Gandalf and we watched him go through this stuff and then he falls into the pit at the end of the chapter with the Balrog after he says fly fools, and then in the next chapter he's just back and wearing white robes, we would be livid. We would literally be like, no, what? Well, what does this mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's more because he's a secondary character than, the fact that it fits the feeling of the magic. And it does fit the feeling of magic. I'm not arguing
Yeah.
that in any way, shape, or form. But I think it has more to do with the fact that he's just not the main character or one of the main characters.
Sure. But okay, let me use a slightly different example. Um, have you seen Once Upon a Time TV series?
Yeah, we watched about a half a season of the first one. It never hooked us.
Okay. So there's a dude who can grant wishes. How do these wishes work? Don't know. But you can get them. The wishes work, despite the fact that you know almost nothing from how it works, because you are set up for the fact that wishes have consequences.
Hmm.
So yeah, they can be limitless, but there are consequences.
Hmm.
So, and that's what I mean by your system doesn't have to be hard in order to be used as resolution, as long as you do set up enough boundaries for the reader to feel satisfied. Now, whether those
Right.
boundaries are the limitations or the consequences doesn't matter. You just need some kind of like, it's not just open ended. Richard Summons Deus Ex Machina is not the whole of your magic system. Thanks, Terry Goodkind, because that was all of his magic system.
Yeah.
And I did feel very dissatisfied with every
Yep.
single book
Yeah.
that I put myself through. So
I never got past the first book. So,
yeah.
yeah, I didn't suffer long.
There was one where he defeated communism by carving statues.
I mean, that makes sense.
I'm not even kidding. I wish I was kidding. I wish I was kidding. Like, I wish this was a joke.
And look, if you're a Good Kind fan, don't be sending us hate mail. It's subjective. We didn't like it. We're not saying that Good Kind wasn't a great storyteller
Oh,
or writer. He
no,
just
no, no,
wasn't a great
no. You can
storyteller
send
or
me hate mail.
writer for
Good kind
us.
sucked. You can send me hate mail all you like. That dude sucked.
Mm.
Then he
Yeah.
went on camera
Address
and he was
that
like,
to Marie at
I I don't write fantasy. I write about the human condition. Like, whatever,
yeah,
my dude.
yeah. Now,
No,
as an individual, and he lives here, he lived
lived.
right down the road from me. So as a real human being, he was a little pretentious.
Yeah.
But, if you liked his writing, and that's the way I feel about everything, as much as I bitch about stories and as much as I bitch
Mm.
about whatever, if you find value in it, then I'm very, very happy. That's what stories are for. They're there to bring value to people's lives. It's just that I, he wasn't a good writer for me, and obviously not for Murray.
Yeah. So I don't judge any of his fans. You are welcome to be his fans. My opinion, flat out, as a writer, he sucked.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. Like I said, I only suffered through the first book, and I do say that I suffered through the first book.
Yeah.
Although I will say, and I don't think he wrote it, there is one section of that first book that is breathtakingly written, and that is when he was with the Mord sis, which sounds so much
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. But when he goes into that sex dungeon, I don't think he wrote that because the voice changes and the writing style changes and the sentence structure changes and the choice of verbs changes. But it is so well written and so dripping with emotion, dripping with, sensory details. If the whole book had been written like that, it'd be a different story.
And then what happens at the end of that scene? Richard locks all of his PTSD into a box through the power of summon Deus Ex Machina, and
Yep.
on he goes.
Yeah. I'm just pointing out that it was well written. I'm not saying the story was good. I'm just saying from a sentence structure standpoint, it was very well written. That one little section. I
Yeah.
didn't feel that way about the
Yeah.
rest of it.
I don't often let myself rant about Terry Goodkind, but man, I could rant about Terry Goodkind.
All right, but I feel weird because normally it's me doing what you're doing and you going, okay, yeah, but let's get back to the topic. This new house has changed you, Marie. You haven't just moved to a new house. You've changed in other
I
ways.
you triggered my Terry Goodkind rant.
So no, but getting back to Magic System, well, actually a couple things from our peanut gallery. And by the way, if you would like to watch us tape these things live, because we are a couple months ahead, although we're a little less ahead because Marie moved and we've all got holidays and, so there's going to be several episodes that we're not recording. We'll have to catch up at the new year. But if you would like to join us and watch us do this live, all you have to do is join the writers room, the free area. You can obviously join the members area as well. But if you go to writersroom.us, you can sign up for the free area. And one of the things you get, there's quite a few things you get in the free area, but one of the things you get is you can join us when we're recording this podcast.
Yep.
So one of the
So,
peanut gallery, when I had said what I said about you can't write a story about gravity, they said, I'm trying to think of where it's at.
challenge accepted.
Yeah, challenge accepted, but I can't find it now. There
Good
it
luck.
is. So if you do write that, I want to read it. That's all I wanted to say because I would be very interested to see how that's pulled off because
If
that
you
is
send it
beyond my
along,
comprehension.
if you send it along, we might even critique it.
There you go. So we actually have a lot of questions for the first time because
Yes.
usually Peanut Gallery is very quiet when they're watching us, but there is a lot of activity to this morning, which is awesome.
So
So
let's
one of the
start. Yeah, do you want to start with the first one, the separation between elemental magic and natural energy magic?
um yeah, I was going to start with the second one because it interests me more, but we can start with that one. That's fine.
I'll tell you why I want to start with that one, because it leads me into the place where I like to start when I'm defining my magic system, whether I'm doing a soft magic system or a hard magic system. The place that I like to start at is the source of the magic. Okay. Now, the source of the magic to me feels like the key part to tie into your theme. Tolkien's source is the natural world.
Mhm.
Avatar: The Last Airbender's source is elemental magic. It's the four elemental powers. The Jedi, the Force is Star Wars magic
Mhm.
system. Get the drawn from there. Our boy Brandon Sanderson in Mistborn, they consume magic and then they use that. They consume metals and they use that as magic. So it's a consumption of natural elements, which ties into the kind of scarce resources that he's playing with there as part of his
Well,
thematic elements.
and if I remember correctly, the actual source was never like where it comes from. I mean, obviously we burn metal to
Yep.
get the magic, but if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I read that series, but I'm pretty sure that there was some type of people, some race, some family, whatever, that were just born with it. And then they tried to keep their lines pure, but people are people and we tend to fornicate with whatever. And so it is some of the other bloodlines have gotten the ability to do it. But I think that's kind of
But that's not the source. That's the manipulation. That's who can be a mage.
no, no, I'm saying, but the source would be somehow this one whatever
Mm-mm.
was just born with it, and we don't know
No,
why they were born with it.
no. That's the history. That's how one can become a mage. That's who can become a mage. That's all about mages. The
Okay.
source,
Well then we're just using the same word to mean two different things.
because when I
So,
say source, I mean what is powering your
right.
magic.
And when I say source, I mean why is it
Yeah.
here?
No. Why
Yeah.
did why is it
Yeah.
here's a different question. But what is powering your magic to me is a great place to tie it to your theme. To draw on Sanderson again in Stormlight Archive, it's the Ever Storm. That's the
Hmm.
source of of the magic, and
Yeah.
that one isn't genetically driven. The mages, whatever. In my world, it's basically a manipulation of quantum space,
Hmm.
and so on. So it's that thematic component can be that place. What is the core source? What powers your magic can be a great place to tie your theme in. And the Peanut Gallery asked, what is the separation between elemental magic and natural energy magic? Okay, so obviously, every world builder, you have complete freedom. If you want to make these two things the same, you can. Okay. This is a fantasy world. It is your world. You can do anything you like as long as you make it internally consistent within your story. Okay. As long as it makes sense in your story and your readers buy into it, you can do anything you like. But the general, and that's kind of my caveat on world building stuff, but the general kind of guideline that I would give is elemental magic is basically tied into the either the four base elements with a fifth one normally thrown in for good measure, fire, earth, air, water. But you can also have it tied into more elements than that. You can tie it into the whole periodic table, like Sanderson did with Mistborn, which is a kind of elemental magic system. You can tie
Hmm.
it into, I think the one where you catch animals in little balls has
Pokemon.
like 16 different forms of grass in their elemental magic system. Like, you can go crazy with that elemental system. Okay. So it's basically elemental forces within your world are the magic system. And the user of magic accesses those elemental forces and uses them. Conversely, natural magic means you draw from the physical, natural world, not the concept of elements as you would in an elemental magic system. So, in an elemental magic system, you're drawing from a kind of concept. Now, the physical element might be involved and might make it easier, but you're basically drawing from like a magical element. With
Mhm.
a natural system, you're drawing from the whole of nature. You're either renewing yourself from like the wild places, or you're consuming parts of nature, like you're eating a frog in order to get a croaking voice, stuff like that, like kind of
I mean,
which
that's
is
not
natural.
magic. That's just how it works.
Sure. I actually have on just in time world building. If you go over to that channel, I've got a whole playlist on magic systems, and I have both natural magic and elemental magic videos. So you can check those out side by side for like a full breakdown of my thoughts on the two. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm done.
So and here's another thing, and this isn't necessarily the division between elemental magic and natural magic, but a lot of us are going to gravitate to something. There's one of the things that separates authors from authors is not necessarily ideas, but it's more gut feelings. Every author kind of gravitates to what type of stories they like to tell, where they want to be, emotionally and everything like that. And it wasn't until I was started to work on the Realm of the Dying Sun that I realized that pretty much every big magic system that I've ever created has always just been a physics of the world.
Mm,
So it's just it's the same thing as gravity. It exists because it needs to exist, or the entire universe wouldn't, just like quantum mechanics here and gravity and everything else, our universe wouldn't exist in the form that it is if we didn't have those things. And I think that's the reason why no one in any of my worlds sees it as magic. I mean, in Genesis Saga, I even pick on that. One of the kids is like, "Wow, you're doing this thing," and it's like, "Dude, I'm just melding the essence, dude. This isn't magic." Because the word
mm.
magic exists in the world, but it means the same thing as in our world. It means illusion and trickery and sleight of hand and all of that, as opposed to what magic means in a lot of fantasy. And I didn't realize that until I got into really delving into the creation of the realm world, that I tend to make magic systems as science. They're just a reality. And that's, I don't know. When you were saying that, it just made me think about that, and how now I really focus in on how I create my magic systems for what I need them to do for the story. So I don't know if you
So
would consider that. natural magic or, nature magic or
No,
elemental
no, no, no,
magic.
no, no. What is the source of your magic? Like, is it just, it's just around, it's just a force that people can use. It's those little goggledy things, right? Um,
I mean, depends, but yeah,
speckles.
yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, in Genesis, it is the spectals. They're atoms, and that's the way I
Mm,
describe them. I describe them like they look like atoms,
yeah.
to the people that can use the power. But it just exists. It's just a
Yeah, yeah,
part of it.
100%. Same as atoms in our world, and
Yeah,
your mages can manipulate them.
yeah.
So I would describe that um, as a one force, one uh, what I call a single source magic system.
Hmm.
There is a single source of power accessed through these speckles that can be manipulated by people who know how.
Yeah,
And that manipulation takes the form of whatever it takes the form of. It can take
right,
different forms in different cultures, etc., etc. So,
right.
to me, there's a couple of different ways you can power your magic system. Natural world, elemental magic, single source magic, which is basically anything like Robert Jordan, your world, Stormlight to a certain extent, and so on. Then I can't remember the rest. I did a video on it. It's been a while, but I've got like a whole list of like little things that power your magic system that just define it for me. And then
Yeah,
once you know what your source is, your next step is then figuring out how do people actually manipulate it. Um, how do they access the source and how do they manipulate the source? And they can manipulate it through spells. Like that can be what spells are. They speak words and that manipulates the source. And then you can go into details like, does everybody need to speak the same words, or is it just that you speak words? And so on and so forth. Do you need to speak the words in a specific language and use the language of magic? You know,
yeah.
like in my
Do
urban
you need a
fantasy.
wand?
In my urban fantasy, I have different cultures use uh, they all use magic, right? And they use fairy dust to power the magic. But fairy dust is manipulated by different ways by different cultures. So
Mhm.
the Irish druids carved feathers onto staves and then used those staves to affect reality,
Mhm.
right? So they were like written spells. The Japanese did sumi art,
Mhm.
ink brushstroke art to create their spells and then fuel them with magic. The
Mhm.
Native Americans they did petroglyphs
Mhm.
and fueled them with fairy dust, etc., etc., etc. So, or some of them did knot work, and fueled the knots with.
Right.
So you basically shape the spell through some kind of art or writing that your people do, and then you fuel it through fairy dust.
Yeah. So still one source,
Yeah,
the fairy dust.
yeah. Well, it's a
But
consumable item source in this case, but yeah,
yeah, I just always like to push myself to try and figure out, what you called the history, and that's a good word for it. I like to figure out where, like, why it is here. Where did it come from?
yeah,
And most of my magic systems, that's why I kind of lead to that. Oh, it's just another form of physics in this universe because it just
mm,
exists. It was however this universe was created, it was created along with it.
mm,
Until I did the realm, and then the realm is the only one that I figured out where it actually comes from because it's needed
yeah.
because the story needs it. But yeah,
So,
that's
so
kind of the way I've always looked at it.
I tend to focus on what would the effect be on the cultures.
Hmm.
Um, like if you throw magic into the mix, what happens when agriculture starts?
Hmm.
Does agriculture start at all? Because if druids can call animals to you, why would you ever need to not hunt?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we did that. We actually talked about magic in a different episode, and we went down the path of if you have magic, what does it do to the rest of
Yeah.
your society? You know, we talked
Yeah.
about war, food
Mm.
production, food
All of those.
storage, transportation, communication, entertainment. Those are the
Mm.
things that, once if you get a magic system, you need to think about it. You need to think about how it actually is in the world. Is it very rare? Are there only five
Yeah.
wizards in your world? And we don't understand what they do. They can fall into pits and come back wearing a different outfit. Like, great. Then that's one thing. And you don't have to worry about how it affects the world because
It doesn't.
most people live their entire lives and never see it.
Mm.
Or is it, you know, like Mistborn, where the noble houses pretty much have a dozen, 2 dozen of these type of mages, and they use them to their political advantage through assassinations and
Mm.
intimidation and theft and everything else. Then that's going to affect the world. It's going to affect
Yeah.
how the world is built. It's going to affect the laws of the world. It's going to affect everything. And so we did kind of go into that in that
Yeah.
other
We
video,
did.
but it's still something to think about when you're creating your magic systems.
Anyway, we that was the question I wanted to address because I love sources of magic systems and it's always an
Right.
interesting thematic question for me. What
Yes.
was the question you wanted to address?
So for me, it was what are some effective ways to actually get those to the reader without info dumping?
100%.
And like it's so funny that we're so much alike in so many ways, but like this is a great example of how different we are and what we really find fascinating about our careers. Because yeah, I'll make up the histories and stuff like that, but that's definitely not my favorite thing to do. But learning how to manipulate grammar, learning how to manipulate prose in a way that you're giving a ton of information to the reader, but in an engaging way, in a way that they don't even notice that they're learning. They don't even notice that they're gaining this information because it's so exciting. That is something that I find incredibly fascinating and something I spend a lot of time thinking about. So
On this
my
topic, we actually do have a slight difference of opinion because
mm,
you do like a classroom scene. Uh,
well, I've written one. You can't say I like a classroom scene. I've done it once.
yes, but you do like a classroom scene to explain magic.
I did it once. You have sex with one goat. And from there on out, you're just known as the goat guy. And one classroom scene in one book.
So, I don't like classroom scenes. I don't like classroom scenes because I feel like the reader gets this immediate kind of like, oh, right, I'm being taught magic now.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
which to me feels like feels like it's interrupting the flow of the story.
Right.
I grant you, my writing style is not for everyone. I've had people say that my books are dense with world building, which I understand they are. Um, but I like to write with a mage as a character and then just show them using the magic system
Yeah.
and show it enough times and the reader will catch up.
Yeah.
I hope.
And that's where I was getting to that is,
Yeah.
I treat it the same way as I treat world building and as I treat scene setting.
Mm.
I either have the character interact with the setting interact with the character, or the setting interact with the setting. And to define what I mean by setting, I mean everything that isn't the POV character. So secondary characters, tertiary characters, buildings, ground, stuff,
Mm.
everything. And so instead of teaching them, and yes, I do have the one, but in my defense, it was also my very first published book. So, we're talking 20 years ago, but it's it's still that when you have it active, when you have the story being given to the reader, all this extra information being given to the reader through just interacting with it, just interacting with the stuff, you avoid the as you know Bob dialogue or as you know Bob narration. Because like if the guy has been using, or the girl's been using magic for 20 years, then they're not going to sit there and think about the intricacies of what they need to think about and what they need to do. They're just going to do it, just like the rest of us. None of us get in
Yeah.
the car and go, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing called a key and I'm going to stick it in the ignition and I'm going to turn it clockwise, which is going to engage. Like we just
Yeah.
drive because we've been doing it forever.
Now,
So,
what you do need to do if you are interacting like that is you do need to use words that will give the reader the framework they need to
mhm.
understand to know what's happening, right?
And
So,
that's where the magic comes into it. The magic
yeah,
comes in to crafting moments in your story that do not info dump, do not feel like you're teaching the reader anything, and yet it's written in a way where it 100% does that.
yeah,
And that's where, like, that's what makes me giddy when I write a paragraph that explains something that's a high concept, something that doesn't exist except for in
mm,
this story, and I do it in a couple paragraphs, and you don't even notice that at the end of that, you know how that thing works.
yeah.
That to me is magical.
So one of the peanut gallery asked, do you prefer to explain the magic limitations through the limitations of the spell or through the limitations of the character casting the spell? Always the character for me, because um, I do everything through the character.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the first interaction you have with magic in the Hidden Blade, bar the prologue, which is a slightly different thing. The prologue's a bit chaotic, but in the first chapter, your first interaction with magic is through Louis, who, after he uses his shadow jump the second time, he leans against an alley wall and pants, and I explicitly say there, using his Dusang twice in such short proximity to each other left his Elamar weak, which
Hmm.
basically gives the reader the information that they need in a single sentence info dump to understand what the limitation of magic is. I don't know if that's the exact words that I use. Probably something a little more poetic.
Yeah. But that's still the same thing that I'm talking about,
Mm,
which is just let the character interact with the world around them and the world around them interact with them, and then make sure you craft it in a way that you are teaching the reader these things without actually making it feel like you're teaching them. So a lot of it is through subtext. You read this paragraph and there's no way you can't get what the meaning of this paragraph is, or at least 90% of readers will get what this means. And the 10% that miss it, maybe the next time you do it they'll pick it up, or maybe they're just not smart enough to read you.
yeah.
um, and that happens too.
Someone made a great comment here. In Full Metal Alchemist, the source of magic is souls departing from the world and passing through the gate, which is just extra depressing. And they're right. Full Metal Alchemist, if you have not watched it, is an amazing anime. It is amazing. And its magic system is glorious.
Yeah. Somebody also asked, are all fireballs equal? And basically they're asking, are all characters equal, or is there a disparagement? And that really depends on the story you're telling.
Yeah, it depends
So,
on the story and the magic system.
yeah.
Um,
So in Genesis, there's a huge disparagement between different people with the abilities they were born with. And in the new thing that I'm working on, The Realm of the Dying Sun, there isn't. Everybody is the same. Well, I mean, I'm still in the process of working on that story, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to end up just being magic is magic.
So with me, it is different person to person because hobby, especially the internally facing magic, people are born with different abilities. The same way you have people who can run faster, people who can jump higher, etc., etc. There's a difference in ability. The external magic, however, is just dependent on how much you're willing to pay. Pony up, and it can all be yours.
Yeah, costs are always a really fun thing to play with,
Yeah.
especially if the audience learns the outcome of those costs. And then when the character has to give it all to, achieve the ultimate ends, then the stakes are there and the reader understands. And again, that goes back to the beginning of this is the most important thing is make sure that you only use the magic system based off of how much the reader understands the
Mm,
stuff, the costs. You can't really have a cost if, like, let's say your character's made out of water. They're just a water being and they're
mm.
sloshing around. Maybe they're still bipedal, but they're sloshing around. And at the end of the story, for the very first time in your story, the bad guy pulls out a pistol and aims it at your POV character. You're like, um, I mean, maybe it'll hurt. Like, we haven't talked about this. We don't know anything. Should I be worried that the guy's got a gun on him, or does it not matter because you're shooting water?
Yeah.
So the only reason why I say this is because last night in the writers' room critique pod, uh, this one person read and they had a water character, and they didn't describe the character until later. So there was this one part where they felt pain at the beginning, and
Mm.
then later we get that they're they slosh out of something and into something, and that. So during the critique, I was like, so um, how do they feel pain if they're made out of water? Like it seems like they wouldn't have a nervous system. And she was like, huh, I didn't think about that.
I once read a short story that was billed as hard sci-fi that I promise you was fantasy
Hmm.
because it involved sentient mathematical equations. It was really well done. I really enjoyed it. But just because it's a mathematical equation does not make it a hard sci-fi story. Anyway, sorry, you distracted me. Look at that, distracted me. Let's get back to the topic. We're talking about magic systems and we're answering questions. Um, Classroom scenes. Uh, yeah. People are calling your
What about our
classroom scene
producer?
a
We've
crutch,
completely
Drake.
ignored our
They're
producer.
calling it a crutch.
So I'm sorry, I was saying something. Say it again.
They're calling your classroom scene a crutch.
Oh, it 100% is. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. Um,
Um, I was gonna say we've been ignoring our producer.
we
So what
have.
does she have in here that she wants us to
So
cover?
I can tell you what else I say about magic systems in my upcoming non-fiction book about world building, which will drop sometime in 2025. Um, I've got the source of magic, the cost of magic.
Mhm.
And I do want to say here with costs, be aware of what your costs imply. You know, if one of your costs is that people get addicted to the substance they consume, bear in mind that you are automatically introducing a theme of substance abuse. Like 100% that's what you're introducing into your theme, you know. Um, and if that's on purpose, 100% go for it right away. If it's not on purpose, maybe either consider making it on purpose or picking a different cost, you know.
The problem that I have with costs is a lot of times the writer will pick a cost that is story destroying, and so
Mm,
therefore they can never pull the trigger on that. You
mm.
know, the cost is if they do this, a nuclear bomb goes off and kills everybody. Well, you can never use that in your story. So, like Wheel of Time, the cost is Rand's going to go insane.
Yeah.
And so they constantly go, oh, is he going insane now? What about now? What about now? Is he going insane now? What about
No,
now?
he's not going to go insane. He's the chosen one, and we
Right,
all know
exactly.
it.
Exactly. So that cost just, it never has a payoff.
Although, let's be honest, if Martin was writing Wheel of Time, Rand would have gone insane. Because
Um,
Martin fires the nuclear bomb and then goes, oops, I was supposed to end the story, right?
yeah, yeah. And going back to you guys picking on me about the classroom scene, it is actually, so I'm rewriting my very first book. That's my next thing coming out. It should be out for Comic Con in July, but you can read it for free. That's already done and it's already up. If you go to Starving Writer Studio / Genesis, you can download the first 15 chapters for free. And I think chapter 4 is the classroom scene. So you can go read it and tell me how I did with not a single penny spent on your part.
You can also, if you're willing to wait until the end of the month, all of our published books, including Magic Fall and my epic fantasy books, will be on sale for $1 as part of the giant book sale. So you can pick them up then too.
Yep.
Okay. I almost made a terrible joke. So, uh, then going on from the cost of magic, we come to what can and can't be done with magic. So basically, do you have hard limitations? Like I normally am dicey about things like resurrection because it's got weird implications. I normally warn people to be careful with travel because if you institute global teleportation networks, you end up with a world like today minus the technology. In fact,
Yeah.
you end up with a world more interconnected than today minus the technology, and it has dramatic impacts on your society. So, things to be aware of, what can and can't be done with magic.
Yeah.
And then how
Yeah.
is
I
magic
mean, rituals
manipulated?
rituals have to fit. So I don't write those types of stories for the most part. I can't think of any time that I have. But ritualistic magic, and I don't really enjoy it as a fan either. That's the other thing is you really should write what you're a fan of. I'm not a huge fan of the magic systems that are voodoo magic or, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
It
go on.
looked like you had something to say.
I do, but go on. Finish your thought, and then
So,
I'll chip in.
but I feel like if you're going to do something like that, it brings a tone with it,
Mm.
and the story that you're telling kind of has to fit that tone as well. Because magic is going to add a lot of tone to your story in what you're doing. So, like what you were just saying, if you can travel, you can teleport to the other side of the known world or whatever, then that's going to advance technology, you know,
Mm.
technology with air quotes around it. And so that's going to affect everything, you know, transportation and shipment of goods and, you know, all that other stuff, knowledge, shipment of information. And so how is that going to affect your world? And if that's the story you're telling and that's the tone that fits really well with the story that you're telling, then that works. It just depends on what you're doing.
So I am going to push back on you calling voodoo a ritual magic. Voodoo is a sympathetic magic system. Um,
I was just using
as
terms.
no, no, I know. As below, so above. That's voodoo's base principle, right? So
Yeah,
in you replicate and then transfer.
right. I was more
Generally
meaning
speaking.
like the picks in Conan
Yeah,
and
100%.
stuff like that.
But here's the thing, right? Ritual is a very big word. Anything can be a ritual. My druid sitting in her shed carving her little fadas onto her stave and preparing that spell, that's a ritual. Your kid melding the essences, getting himself into the right mindset to see the speckles, it's a ritual. Yeah? Ritual is a very big word. That's why there's that joke of like, when an archaeologist doesn't know what it's for, they go, it's a ritual object.
Right.
Because it is. Because we all have little rituals. Celebrating your birthday is a ritual.
But I was narrowing the
I,
definition
I
there.
know, I know, but you didn't
Okay.
explicitly narrow it. You were talking
Right.
about dark rituals,
Right.
which is 100% fine, but it's not um, per se ritual magic. Ritual magic, generally, to my mind, means groups cooperating, so working together in a ritual, or somebody going through specific steps in order to create a ritual setup. Now, that could be something like vending machine magic, where you have a power source and your ritual is you do the ritual and it does a thing for you. It
Yeah.
always does this thing for you, kind of like a Cthulhu monster effect, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Cthulhu is also where my mind was going.
yeah, you put $2 in the cosmic vending machine, and out pops a horror that ends the world. Like
Snickers, a Snickers bar.
a
That's what
or a
that is.
Snickers bar. Yeah.
That is what is ending the world.
Yeah, and that's vending machine magic. Right? Um, but that's also ritual magic. So
Yeah.
ritual is a very big word in magic. Anything can be ritual, and I
Hmm.
know, I know, I think too much about these things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, and if you guys haven't checked out her world building channel, Just in Time Worlds, you definitely should go there because, you know, and that's again one of the dichotomies between me and you. You spend way more time thinking about world building than I do.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I'm much more invested in the characters. Not that you're not invested in your characters. I'm just saying that's where I put my time and energy more than in the world building.
So for me, the characters are an outgrowth of their environment.
Hmm.
Um, and and so I have this need to understand their environment. But it's also just plain old interesting to me. I've recently gone on a gonna kick reading a philosopher called Han, who I recommend, despite the fact that we have very opposing viewpoints on some philosophical outputs. But he's got a very interesting book about ritual and its importance and what its loss has caused as cost us as a society, which I think was very interesting.
Yeah. All right. What else?
Okay, so besides, details by which magic can be manipulated. So by this, I just mean, as I said, like, is it manipulated through spells? Do you need an implement? Do you need a wand? Do you need to consume a metal? Do you need to eat something, drink something? Do you need to speak something? Do you need to make dance moves? Do you need to tap your heels twice in the your red shoes, whatever the case
Say
is?
there's no place like home.
There's no place like home. What do you need to do? And if you can kind of achieve that thing, then your magic happens. So it's basically
You
just
also need to think about the difference between innate magic and learned magic.
yes,
Innate magic means that you have to be born with it. You have to be special. Commoners are never going to have this. And learned magic just means you just need to have the knowledge. Like your
mm,
vending machine example works really well for this. If I find the book that has the instructions on how to put the $2 into the vending machine, I'm going to get this thing. I'm going to get
yeah.
this Snickers bar every single time. And so I don't have to be special. I don't have to be born with it. I just need to have access to that knowledge. And then knowledge becomes very powerful in those stories.
That is indeed one of the things that I have on my system, which is how do you become a mage? Are you born with it? Do you need to learn it? Is it both? Do you need innate talent and you need to be taught?
Yep.
Does everyone have it? Does only a few select people have it? Um, Spoilers for Sanderson's Stormlight Archive. If you have not read this far, this is a spoiler. I'm warning you now. Um, he to be a mage in Stormlight Archive, you have to have suffered trauma, emotional trauma, because that attracts the spring.
Hmm.
So that's nice. um,
Yeah. My friend Marion Harmon, who's a superhero writer, if you're into superhero novels, I recommend wearing the cape. But his how they become superheroes is they have to have what's called a breakthrough.
mm,
And to do that, it has to be a near death experience. So, one of the aspects of his world is there are tons of people who accidentally commit suicide in his world because they really, really, really want to have, some type of superpower. So, they do something that's going to almost kill them, but it kills them and they don't, because really it has to kill you. And then right at the last second, you have a breakthrough and you just get this power that saves your life. But most people just kill themselves. So it's a
yeah,
really interesting kind
yeah.
of limitation to his magic system.
And one of the peanut gallery just brought up an interesting point about magic items, which is another thing that I ask about in my questions of guiding you through a magic system, which is, do magic items exist? Both consumable magic items, so things like potions, staves, scrolls, etc., and does permanent magic items exist? What is the difference between them? Who can use them and who can make them? Because using them and making them, right? So if they can be made by a mage but used by anyone, that basically democratizes magic like technology for us, and mages
Hmm.
become like engineers. And that opens
Hmm.
up a whole plethora of interesting thematic storylines. Like, what's stopping someone from opening up a magic sweatshop and
Hmm.
having mages chained to workbenches with quotas they need to make or they don't eat in this production of items? And then you can tell a whole story about that. So, sorry.
No, no. But yeah, even that, like I just realized a couple weeks ago that if I got the power to time travel and I went back like 100 years, I would never be able to prove that I was a time traveler. Because I'd be like, looking at them with that big rotary phone. I'd be like, oh, one day you're going to be able to carry that around in your pocket. And they're like, really? How? I'm like, um, I think it has to do with space. I don't know.
100 years ago, actually, I might be useful 100 years ago if I could speak to the right people, because I'd need to speak to some engineers because I understand the principles of making a computer, but I
But
don't have
but
I don't have the
you're an
actual skill.
engineer. You're an engineer. I'm a guy who makes crap up for a living. I literally could not prove to anyone. They just be like, "You're an idiot." Like, no, I'm from the future.
Well, if you went back 1,000 years, at least you could make a bicycle work, and that would revolutionize the Middle Ages. Because
True. I don't know
anybody
if I
can
can
make a
make a
bike.
bicycle.
I mean, come on, any of us can make a bicycle work. It's just levers and gears. Come on.
Maybe. Yeah. One of the people said that really does show why there's that difference between us because you have that engineering background, even though it's in computer science, it's still you've got that technical science background and I don't. But anyway, we're
Mm,
floundering. What
we
else?
are. All
What
right.
else do we got?
How do you become a mage? That's it. Oh, I want to just address one other thing. Besides all of that, all those magic things we've spoken about and all the elements that we've addressed, I do want to talk about something else. Don't get so hung up on your magic system that you forget that it's a fantasy world. Fantasy is bigger than just magic. There are creatures, there are geographical features. You can have a genius loci like Tolkien's mountain, which was alive. It wasn't Saruman in the movies. I know Saruman was attacking them, blah blah blah, whatever. In the book, it was the mountain itself was alive and attacking the Fellowship as they attempted to cross it. Okay, so you can make like geographical features, like Martin's wall, his 1,000 foot high ice wall and all that nonsense. Like, and those fantastical elements can add so much that it really doesn't matter how hard or soft or etc. your magic system is because you bring in all of that fantastical elements through your world.
And it still comes down to telling a story.
Yes.
And that's the reason why we started, and I guess we should end at pushing that writers should be thinking about what themes that they're playing with, how they're going to convey those themes to the reader without ever mentioning them. And that's why elements like magic, when you think about them from a thematic standpoint and how they affect my theme and how I'm going to be able to use it to tell this story that has this human element, because ultimately that's all that matters. At least that's all that matters to me is the human elements underneath all of this adventure and magic and death and near escapes and all this other stuff. It's about how does it affect us as human beings. That's really what I try to tie everything into. Everything I write is always about how does it affect me as a human? How does it affect humanity? How does it make me want to be a better person?
And I think that is a good note on which to end this episode. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social media such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Marie Mullaney, your co-host on this literary adventure. Our goal is to provide you with valuable insights and discussions on writing. If you believe in our mission, please like and subscribe our podcast. Sharing our episodes with your community not only helps us grow, but also contributes to a richer, more diverse conversation about storytelling. We appreciate your support. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.